Why is evaluation of training important? Okay, there's several things here. One, back in 2009, OPM's regulations were updated to say that all agencies need to evaluate their training programs. That's 5 CFR 410.202. Who can ever remember that? But it says that agencies must evaluate their training programs on an annual basis. In addition, 5 CFR Part 250 requires that each agency conduct an annual survey of their employees, but drilling down into that, there has to be an opportunity for professional development and growth for your employees as well. So again, there's regulation. There's an accountability factor. There's a high expectation for wise and documented use of training dollars. We all know this. We've seen it before. How many times you ask, how much money did that cost you? And we know that budgets, resources are scarce. There has to be a connection between effective funding, usage, and the agency's outcomes. And especially in this administration, government transparency. The current administration has put an emphasis on government accountability and transparency. The mandate to share the results of government spending and related outcomes, we are required to make that public. That's important. Training in the federal government, again, the training and the effectiveness and evaluation is critical, especially when your mission is constantly changing and it is of a high visibility. So you really need to make sure that your training is, well documented as well. And also, there's obviously the Federal CLO Council. This is a high-level learners that have come together to spend their time and their resources to collectively ensure that agencies demonstrate accountability, transparency, and training effectiveness. So these are the important reasons why. But what do we measure? What do we have to measure? Well, obviously, you want to make sure the learners, get a nice smile sheet. Yay, I like this training. Oh, goody, goody, goody. Everybody gets these little smiley faces, and that's good. Okay, that's fine. And you can usually do this with a simple questionnaire, no problem. Well, but you also want to make sure they actually learned something. Did they actually gain some knowledge, skills, and abilities that they can then apply on the job? Well, how do you kind of measure that kind of data? Well, you can kind of ask them, did you learn something? Yeah, I learned a great deal in that class. What was it? I don't know. And just because it looks like they have this new knowledge, skills, and abilities and so forth, doesn't mean they can actually apply it back on the job. How many of you have actually gone to a training program going, yeah, I'm so psyched, but then when you get back, it's like, yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you learned that. Okay, now let's just keep doing it the same old way. Okay? That is not going to change how your organization does business. And so therefore, you need to see how going to training affects the operation of your organization. There has to be that connection. For example, if you know it was training, are you seeing less and less employee complaints or customer complaints? Maybe there's a reduced amount of time that it takes to actually create and submit a report because they've gone to this training. Well, maybe there's an increased number of inspections because they've learned this new process. Those things can be directly related, and you can point direct to your organizational mission going, yeah, see, it was effective. But you have to be able to capture that data. So how do you measure this? Oh my God, there's model after model after model. It's model soup. There's lots of stuff out there. And I'm not going to bore you with one. The one we're going to kind of talk about today is how OPM training measures its training effectiveness. And again, based on our PAR report, our leadership decided to go with the Kirkpatrick model for evaluating our training. Again, we loosely used the Kirkpatrick model before our PAR review, loosely. It was very inconsistent across our programs. We asked different questions in different courses. Some of the questions that we asked were found to be kind of leading the participant to respond to a certain way. Could could lead to some biases. We were not always automatic in our data process collection either. Oh, yeah. Oh, forgot to send that out. Oh well, I'll catch them next time. Also, you know, we were, believe it or not, we were doing pencil and paper evaluations in a lot of our cases. And what that meant was some of our instructors were going in there going, oh, that one's a bad one. I'm going to, you know, throw that one out. Oh, low score. Oh, they didn't like that. That one doesn't count anyway. You know, they were having a bad day. Yeah, that really raised my eyebrows when we found that. So the other thing is none of our faculty had actually been trained in this evaluation methodology to understand what it was to be consistent and why it was important. After we got our results, after we looked at what we were actually doing, we said, okay, got to change. What's out there? What makes sense for us? And that was the Kirkpatrick model. As I indicated earlier, I currently have a bronze level certification in applying this particular methodology, and I'm working towards my silver certification level later on this year. How many of you are familiar kind of with the Kirkpatrick model? Some? Okay. I'm going to briefly go over the two models that are the basis of our evaluation methodology. So the first one, it really is the basic Kirkpatrick 4 levels. There's level 1, which is your reaction. To what degree do participants react favorably to that training program? Again, this is through customer survey measurements. This is your smile sheet. Learning is level 2. To what degree do participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, and attitudes based on their participation in that learning event? Did the participants actually gain new knowledge or skills? Level 3, behavior. To what degree do participants apply what they learned during the class back on the job? That's key. Is the participant able to practice and use this new skills when they go back on the job? And is there actual behavioral change? And how do you know that? And then actually level 4 is results. To what degree do targeted outcomes occur as a result of the learning event? So in other words, how do you know you're achieving your mission based on the fact that somebody's gone to this training class? That's really a very hard measurement to get to, but it can be done. Like most training organizations, we were only really collecting level 1 and level 2. We had a few questions on our course evaluation asking participants if they intended to use it. Yes. Okay, well, yes. And our surveys were not structured such that it was an open-ended question to allow them to elaborate. We also really didn't spend enough time and have our evaluation structured well enough to be able to do level 3 and 4. So it was time to really get busy. We also learned we really needed to consider what is being measured as opposed to when it was being measured. Big key aha moment for us as well. We needed to be deliberate and purposeful in what we were evaluating. We should have considered obtaining evaluation data from multiple sources. You know, it's not just the participant, but it's the participant supervisor. It's really about evidence versus proof. And so it may be focus groups. It may be, during the class, before the class, after the class, multiple times. But you have to have multiple sources of data. We learned this a little bit more as we move towards what they call the New World Kirkpatrick model. And what this does is expands the basic levels, but it reflects the principles, the underlying standards and assumptions that define the topic and the question itself. In this model, there is a distinction between that learning environment. There's a learning environment and there's a work environment. And so your level 1 and level 2 really take place in the classroom, whereas level 3 and level 4 go back to your work environment. And so as long as you keep that in mind as you're structuring your evaluations, you also can then structure on, okay, how am I going to collect that data? And is that data going to show me what I need to be able to demonstrate training effectiveness? So with reaction, the principles within reaction are customer satisfaction, relevance, and engagement. Are these, these are learner-centered. They're very focused and match the degree of evaluation that is specifically needed for that course. In other words, why am I going to this course and what am I really going to get out of this? And how does that apply to when I go back to the job? So that's whether or not you can really connect those things. It's getting buy-in from the participant. The method, the tools, techniques for obtaining your level 1, again, your instructor can observe the participants doing this. You can have pulse checks throughout your training program too. How's that going? Tell me what you just thought I said, and how would you apply that when you go back to the job? Or maybe you do have a dedicated observer actually in the class to see how people are reacting to the material and demonstrating it, through exercises and so forth. At the end of the class, obviously, you can do a survey, but you may also want to do interviews, and you may also want to do focus groups. Again, it's that multiple source data collection methodology that allows you to capture more than just, filled in smile sheets. Your level 2 is learning. The principles are usefulness and credibility. In addition to the sum of knowledge, I know I can do this. The skills, I can do it right now. Or the confidence, I think I can do that on the job. Or the commitment, I know I'm going to use this when I get back on my job. I know I can do this. And again, those kind of data collection methodologies and so forth, you want to do it during the class. With this, you want to do knowledge checks. And it may be a discussion, it may be group or individual discussions and group activities. You may actually do action planning in some of those cases, and you may have role-playing exercises. At the end of the class, again, there may be a test, a quiz, or something like that. You may have participants do presentations. You may end up have them do a teach-back moment. You can also do surveys, and again, you can also do interviews. Level 3 is behavior. This is back on the job, remember. These are the required drivers within the level that are necessary to increase the likelihood. It's the likelihood that the learning occurred and that the behavior has changed and that you can see it on the job. But this is where you need to have processes and systems in place to help reinforce it and monitor it, encourage it, and reward it. How many of you have sent folks to training programs, or you have gone to training programs yourselves, and you have not gone back and you talk to your participant or your supervisor and say, guess what I learned? Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, that's what happens most of the time. You have to have the processes and systems in place where you can support the learning when they get back. That's the only way that it becomes more effective. And it is the responsibility of the training participants and the business managers for this level of evaluation. Now, the training professionals, they have the responsibility for preparing the participants and the managers for the roles before, during, and after, but really reinforcing it is the participant and their manager. So, some of the methodology for collecting data on this one. Again, you want to do on-the-job support, reinforcement. Maybe there's some follow-up activities you can do with them. Hey, show me how you apply this thing that you learned in the class. Oh, you learned a new interview methodology. Hey, can you do a demonstration for the rest of the group on how you interview? Maybe there's some on-the-job training that they can do. Maybe there's self-directed learning that they want to follow up on. They want to try to do something new to try to reinforce their own learning. And maybe they have to go to a refresher class. That's okay. Maybe they have job aids that they can refer back to. The other thing is you want to be able to encourage them. And you can encourage them through coaching and mentoring. I can't stress that enough. That is something that we have building in to our training programs more and more all the time. There's always a coaching and a mentoring aspect in a lot of our classes. Great, great support system for the employees. But you also want to be able to reward that. You want to say, you did a really good job in going to that. And you know what? Based on you going to that training, you were able to do X, Y, and Z afterwards. You need to be able to recognize the fact that they've changed their behavior and they've been able to increase their productivity based on that training that they did. Make sure that you know, whether it's paid performance or just some sort of recognition. And recognition doesn't have to be monetary, but there has to be some sort of recognition to know it was worthwhile for them to go to that training program. The accountability, again, you can also do action learning, again, observation, you can do interviews, you can do, if you want to talk about it in their work review, in their progress review, and so forth. Definitely schedule some sort of interview when you get back with them to say, tell me what you learned about that training and why you think that's important and how you're going to be able to apply that on the job. Build it into their key performance indicators. To really get the evidence of change, you need to measure it, really before and after. So again, talking to your participants before they go to the training class, going, here's what I see and here's what my expectations are, and making sure they know what, that you know what their expectations are as well, gets you on that same even playing field, so that when they do come back, you can talk to them again. How did that meet your expectations? This is what I'm expecting now that you've gone to that X, Y, and Z. It's that open dialogue. Your level 4 is obviously results. What does this look like? Well, the best way to determine what this looks like is really to look and think about the end product first. Really, you want to make sure that any major initiative, most of the time they talk about return on investment. Okay, what was the time, the money, the performance, the resources that we used to get these desired, results. Return on investment is really a monetary type of measurement. For training, it is really return on expectation. It's their expectation, your stakeholders' expectation, your organization's expectation. Think in terms of what does this success finally look like? By having this training curriculum that you have, what will it do for your organization? What should it look like? At the end of people going through this whole curriculum, what does that look like? Where are they in their careers? What are you able to achieve within your organization? And you know what? A lot of times these measurements that you may create at this level 4, it's kind of in your strategic plan. Borrow them from somebody else that has a really good product and going, Don't try to create your metrics yourself. Find metrics that work for you, that somebody else may have already created, because that's exactly what you're trying to get at. Because believe me, you have too many people in there and you get too many cooks in the kitchen and it just becomes a real mess. Don't think about it too hard, but look for places where they have demonstrated this before and borrow it. It's okay. And you want to make sure that you identify key checkpoints along the way. How do you know if you're getting to where you want to be? How do you know what success looks like? Unfortunately, level 4 is probably the easiest to measure, but it is the absolute hardest to correlate in training. Again, some of the methods and tools and techniques for obtaining data for this particular level. Again, customer surveys. Again, barometrics, decreased average hourly training costs, decreased new program development costs, increased percentage of promotable managers, decreased or increased retention in top talent. Those are types of things that other organizations have probably already thought about and like, yeah, that's probably, we could use those same things because that's what we're trying to achieve too. Borrow them. It's okay. The other thing is get letters from your customers, your stakeholders. Validation letters going, yeah, this is really working. It's okay. And the other thing is you want to make sure that you have progress reports on your action plans. Make sure you capture that data.